Hi, my name is Mackenzie, and Heather and I are going to give you an overview of theoretical research in art education. What is theoretical research? So, this methodology is used to develop and build theories related to a topic of study. Instead of looking for one specific, definite answer, researchers utilizing this methodology are looking for a variety of hypothetical possibilities related to their research question. So, this methodology is really focused on creating divergent thinking. Once data is gathered in a study, it is then viewed through the lenses of other well-known philosophers. So, by thinking through these theoretical concepts and applying them to the data gathered, it is hopefully going to raise some different questions and provoke different thinking. This methodology could be used to either create or inform an entire study, or could just be used for one or more aspects. So it depends on how you want to put your study together. The data, once gathered, both quantitative and qualitative, is then viewed through different philosophical lenses. Our text focused on these 6 philosophers. There were more that were options, and I think it probably really depends on what you're choosing to study. But the 6 in our book were Jacques Derrida, who focuses on deconstruction, Guattari Spivak, who is focused on marginality, Michel Foucault, who focuses on power and knowledge and the relationship between the two of them, Judith Butler, whose focus is performativity, Gilles Deleuze, who focuses on desire, and Karen Berard, whose focus is intraactivity. In order to have a little bit of fun with this, because it is a lot of information, we decided to do theoretical speed dating. So I am going to introduce you to 3 of the contestants. Heather will introduce you to the other 3 contestants, and you can see if maybe one of these would fit your research ideas. Contestant number 1 is Derrida, and Derrida's theory is called deconstruction. Deconstruction focuses on understanding relationships between text and meaning. In a research situation, this would involve a lot of discourse analysis of conversations between the researcher and the subjects. In these situations, the researcher should be looking for language strain and missed meaning. What is being voiced? What is not being voiced? And why is this information, this opinion, or this insight being left out? Instead of dismissing this silence, the researcher should be looking at why this silence is occurring and what could this silence mean. Deconstruction can also be used to rethink institutional structures. In the past, Derrida used deconstruction to look at democracy, but it could also be used to look at school systems, universities, or other applicable settings. Deconstruction exploits the tensions between the ways things are and how they have been in the past. So we ask you, does Derrida push you to consider what is missing and not being said? Contestant number 3 is Spivak, and her focus is called marginality. So marginality uses Derrida's deconstruction, but focuses in on post-colonialism and marginality. Spivak views post-colonialism as kind of an untruth because the world is still experiencing so many effects of colonialism that we really haven't moved past it. And marginality is looking at the groups of people who are kind of separate from the center. So she asks us, how do the margin and the center collude and collide? And what is the margin? In her opinion, the margin, instead of being this space away from the center, is actually positioned somewhere inside the center. Cultural identity is an example of an identifiable margin because the center is placing people in these specific categories. An example of the center would be a university or a school district. So we ask you, Does Spivak make you want to raise questions about the margins? Contestant number 3 is Foucault, and his focus is knowledge and power. He rejects the idea that knowledge is power and instead asks you to look at the relationships between knowledge and power. How do knowledge and power express themselves and express one another? And instead of being focused on the origins of power and where it comes from, he's more interested in the functions and effects of power. Productive power is not its own entity as something to be given or taken away. Power forms a chain that relies on relations to advance, multiply, and branch out deeply into social networks. This can include both restrictive and positive relations. It's not just one or the other. So we ask you, does Foucault make you question the meaning of power and knowledge?
Welcome back to another round of Theoretical Speed Dating. I'm Heather Herbay, your other co-host for this incredibly exciting opportunity. So, if Jacques Derrida, or Gayatri Spivak, or Michel Foucault didn't really excite you, the good news is Mackenzie and I have 3 more contestants to introduce you to in the hopes that you might find a theoretical match that interests you. So without further ado, our 4th contestant is Judith Butler, and her focus is performativity. In this theory, Butler seeks to undo normative categories that place rigid structures on how people live out their lives in society. When applying her theory to gender, Butler's theory of gender performativity defines a person's gender as what one does, not what one is. In the text that we read, the authors also discussed how, according to Butler's theory, people do not actually become performers who act out roles, but instead they become subjects through repetition. Butler's theory of performativity may also be applied to other identity categories besides gender. So, does Butler make you want to question societal norms? If not, we'd like to introduce you to our 5th contestant, and his name is Gilles Deleuze. Deleuze's focus is desire, and in his philosophy, he asks the question of what is being produced rather than on what is there. For Deleuze, desire is about production. What does desire do? What are the effects that it produces? We desire not because we lack something that we don't have, but because of the productive force of intensities and connections of desires. He also talks about how experiences mold and shape our desire. We learn what we want, how to get it, how to maintain it, and what it means through the act of connection. So, does Deleuze create wondering about what is being produced? If not, the good news is we have a 6th and final contestant to introduce you to. Her name is Karen Barad, and she is one smart lady. One of her focuses is intra-activity. Barard's work, along with other material feminists, asks how our intra-action with other bodies, both human and non-human, produces subjectivities and performative enactments not previously thought. In her theory, individuals materialize through intra-actions, and their ability to act emerges from within the relationship, not outside of it. So, does Barad tempt you to consider intra-actions with other bodies. We hope that you had fun participating in this fun round of speed dating with the different theorists and philosophers, and we hope that maybe you found a connection to one of their philosophies that you might be able to apply to your research. If you are a little bit confused, don't worry. A lot of this information is rather complicated, and it might require a couple passes to really get the gist of the material. So for the final part of our presentation, we're going to look at the purposes and values of theoretical research and how it can also be applied to art education resource. So when done properly, theoretical research really allows for researchers to insert themselves into the data that they've collected, allowing for the possibility of new concepts to emerge. And in our textbook, there were some research studies that were given as examples. And there was one of the authors, Jason Wallen, in his article, Post-Representational Approaches to Theoretical Research in the Arts. He talks about how theoretical research can hold back predetermined conclusions and allow for divergent thinking and understandings to emerge. And he talks about how if we think about this in terms of what it means for art education, rather we don't really think about what art means, but instead we ask the question, what can art do? There are also, in addition to Wallen's article, there are several other research studies that employed theoretical research method to the research. And I have three brief explanations for you guys if they interest you, for you to maybe go back and read them. One of the studies explores the interpretation of contemporary works of art, and it employs the theory of semiotics and also looks at the work of a gentleman named Roland Barthes. Another research study looked at the utilization of networked digital media in the art classroom and how that could be used to conduct theoretical research. And another one looked at really interrogating the visual culture of art classrooms, and that also relied on the theory of semiotics. So the good news is that if the 6 theorists that Mackenzie and I presented to you don't really interest or excite you, there is a whole other world of theories and philosophers that you can look to apply their work as a lens through which to look at your data when you're doing your research. There's some major questions that can come up when using the theoretical research methodology. One of them is that theoretical research really places weight and importance on the interpretations and readings of the researcher through the frames of other theories. And this really allows for personal interpretations and conclusions to be made. This is a strength, and it allows for divergent thinking and understanding. But what can also happen is that if you are applying multiple theories to analyze data, it can be really difficult to not only write about what's happening in a coherent way, but it can also be hard for others to make sense and understand what's going on as well. So Subjectivity is also an issue with this methodology, as conclusions drawn by researchers can be a result more of their individual interpretations of a theory and how it is applied to their data. Also, we wanted to talk a little bit about some methods that can be used when doing theoretical research, when employing the theoretical research methodology, and some of the things that can help in collecting the data would be, or some of the methods in collecting the data could be using surveys, recordings, observations, in-person interviews, artifact collection, and visual data. We hope that you found this really interesting. There are a list of additional resources that we've included in our research paper, and we hope that you will be able to explore those and get an even more in-depth understanding of this research methodology.